Thank you so much. Wow. What a lovely introduction, and what a nice way to get to know all of you in this room as well. I feel like this is the luckiest week of my life, as a matter of fact, because just Saturday I was participating in something brand new in town, and it's called Peace, Love, and Feminism. It's a group of activists, organizers in particular, and we've dedicated to getting together once a month to discuss our shared and common interest in social organizing in Santa Barbara. And it's just a really wide-ranging group, a very diverse group of all ages and all backgrounds. And we had such a really warm and wonderful meeting on Saturday. I told them I was coming here, and they sent all these great feminine vibes with me. So I bring them to this room as well. And one of the things that we shared and discussed at our first meeting on Saturday was this little, you can't tell because it doesn't look like a booklet, but it is a booklet. Is anyone familiar with this? No? I thought some folks in this room might have seen this back when it came out in 1975. And this is
California.
This is consciousness raising guidelines, which ended up being kind of the textbook for women's groups that were organizing, and they were calling themselves consciousness raising groups. And they were coming together, less formal than this is here, but it started in 1975, and these groups were a very powerful force to be reckoned with in social movements. And so we're using this as our textbook in Peace, Love, and Feminism, which, like I said, met Saturday. But now it's Thursday, so all within 1 week, I'm here with you lovely women who are so wide-ranging in your talents and your expertise. And some of you I know, and I was surprised to see you. My attorney, for example, showed up, right? Yeah.
Make sure you say the right things.
Exactly. So this is being recorded, and as she would advise me to do. So, yes, and there's just so many of you that I know a little bit, and I'm looking forward to getting to know the rest of you as I speak today. So thank you for coming and for being brave to come to a talk like this and making it a priority in your afternoon for lunch. So, as was introduced, I'll just give you a very brief background that I planned on saying. You know that my name is Carrie Hutchinson, and yes, I'm a professor and a department chair over at Santa Barbara City College. And I have a lot of academic things on my resume that you mentioned. But in addition to that, I should mention that I am the mother of two wonderful, phenomenal young girls that are 10 and 12. It's one of my favorite jobs. I'm also very active as an advocate for women and girls in developing countries. And that's my friend Brittany is here from another group that I represent in town called Dining for Women. I don't know if you've heard of that, but if not, you should definitely look it up. Do you love it? Okay, you'll love it. I've got so much to give you, and I'm going to send you in a million directions here because I can already tell you're activists already. Women, as we mentioned, we have so many different roles, and one of those is that we're just go-getters when it comes to the things we're passionate about. So today I'm hoping to develop your passion for something new. So I wear all these hats, but lately my most passionate hat that I wear is as the co-founder of the Santa Barbara chapter of Showing Up for Racial Justice. And I'm going to call it SURJ as I speak today, S-U-R-J. And I have lots of information about SURJ to give with you if you're curious before you leave, and I'll share some of that information today as well. But the gist of it is that our job in SURJ is exactly what it says, showing up. We are dedicated to mobilizing people to show up for racial justice. And you might be wondering what that means. So let's talk a little bit about showing up. Here's the way I see it. Activism is my rent for living on the planet. And when I saw this quote by Alice Walker, it became my motto, because a lot of people wonder why I make myself crazy being so busy like I am. And the reason is I do feel like all of us, and women know this really well, and so I don't need to be explaining it to you, but all of us need to be doing more. I feel that that's just always true. So we're doing a lot, though, aren't we? This is the Santa Barbara Women's March. Did anybody attend the Women's March? Okay, so some of you attended it and some of you didn't. But what it told all of us is that we really are showing up. People are coming out, right? More than ever. Whether we're divided on issues or not, folks are really standing up and showing up and speaking out. And this was just our very little town coming out for the ultimate head count ended up being something like 7,000 people. So it's kind of inspiring to me that people are getting off their seats and doing things when they have passion. But here's the deal, ladies. Today I'm hoping to kind of underscore something that has traditionally been overlooked, in particular by certain groups of people in the feminist movement or the women's movement. And so it's fantastic that we all came out for the march and we showed up, but you might have noticed that the demographics were a little skewed in the march. And I'll share more about that later, but they were not unlike the demographics in this room. And as you'll learn as I speak throughout my presentation, I don't really mince words, and I call things out when I see them. And so I'm just going to tell you, at the risk of your discomfort, that this room is majority white. Am I right? Okay, good. So we can all agree on that and acknowledge that right now and get that big white elephant out of the room. Okay, good. So this piece that really tends to get lost in a lot of movements where people are fighting for the rights that seem exclusively theirs is the fact that our liberation is bound in each other's. We are all interconnected. And again, women, this doesn't need to be explained in detail to women because we do tend to get this, I think, a little more than other folks do. But I'm really... Can I say they are? Because they're not in this room. It's probably getting us saying, right? And, I don't know what it is about us, if we're just deeper people, or maybe it's based on life experience. But I think we do understand that we are interconnected, and that's a big piece of our strength as women. But you should know, of course, I didn't invent this idea. Like I said, we have a copyright attorney in the room, so I never claimed to have invented this idea. Here it was, actually, in the guiding vision and definition of principles for the International Women's March. It was listed in the manifesto that the march presented online and in various places. And don't worry, you don't need to read that because I knew that you'd be sitting far away, and all I wanted to do was highlight the piece right there where it says our liberation is bound in each other's. And in fact, they didn't invent this concept either. So Lila Watson is an important person for you to know. She's an Indigenous Australian activist. And she said it this way: if you've come here to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you've come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. Isn't that phenomenal? And it's been said by so many other phenomenal women and people throughout history. Another way that I like it said here is from Audre Lorde, where she says, I am not free while any woman is unfree, even when her shackles are different from my own. Right? So what these and other brilliant elders are explaining to us is this important concept that until all of us are free, none of us are free. So I have a question for you. It's not a rhetorical question. I want you to answer out loud, but I already know the answer. Do you really believe that in our country, everybody is equally free? No. Just one more time. Do you believe that people are equally free in the United States of America?
No.
Let the record state that we do not believe this. I don't agree with that either, and that's why I knew I was going to like this crowd, and I'm so glad I'm here. Because I'm here to talk to you today about the fact that we could be doing so much more. We really could. In this fight that I'm discussing, which is liberty and justice for all people. So I'm here today to compel you to understand that equal rights issues span far beyond demanding equal privileges between men and women. If we claim to be advocates for equal rights for us, women, we need to be fighting loudly and actively for equal rights, dignity, and justice for all people, not just in our country, but in our world. And this is the fundamental concept of intersectional activism. So this is the perfect time before we jump in for me to define some terms. And just feel free to enjoy your meal while I'm sort of doing a little backdrop here. And I try not to have too much of this in my presentation because you know that I am a teacher and I like to define terms and unpack things ad nauseum. So I'll try to keep it light on the terminology. It's supposed to be a fun lunch too. So just you do need to know these things. So intersectionality, for those of you who don't know, many of you do, this is overlapping or intersecting social identities such as race, class, sexual orientation, and gender, and how they are simultaneously targeted in systems of oppression and discrimination. Okay, meaning that these things always intersect. So there is no one fight. It's an intersection of all social justice fights. In that case, intersectional activism is activism meant to fight all forms of injustice, stemming from the belief that all forms of discrimination, whether based on race, gender, class, sexual orientation, gender expression, religion, or any other characteristic, are all symptoms of a culture that does not value people equally. That's intersectional activism. So this next slide really gets to the heart of the matter. This is from the Women's March, not in Santa Barbara, but a person attended who was holding this poster that's gotten a lot of social media attention, and it says, "I'll see you nice white ladies at the Black Lives Matter march, right?" And so I think a lot of people who saw that poster, their reactions were varied, but I think it really shone a spotlight on something that people from communities of color felt was really missing from the Women's March and has been missing in quite a lot of our so-called activism. So today I'm going to try to answer 3 important questions that are going to help you understand this critical need for us to shift from working solely on our own interests and our own issues into working for collective well-being through this concept of intersectional activism. Here's the questions I'll try to answer today. So first, why do humans tend to prefer and fight for our own groups, like us as women fighting for women's rights? Why are people who belong to the white racial majority needed desperately in the fight for racial justice in particular? And lastly, what can each of us do moving forward after we leave this room? Does that sound good to you?
Yes.
Okay, good. That's going to be a lot, so there's always more if you want to book me at a later time, too. I can come back and expand on these ideas. So the first thing that we'll talk about is why people tend to prefer and fight for our own groups. So I know you're having lunch here. This is supposed to be kind of a relaxing social event, so I don't want you to get too worried. Usually when I mention that I'm about to speak about this, white people get really twitchy because they're like, she's about to call us a racist. She's about to say that we're a bunch of racists in this room. Don't worry, I'm not going to do that exactly. Because I'll relax. They're not serving wine here today, right? No, okay. Well, I would say have a sip of your wine, but just relax and don't worry. I'm not going to offend you too badly up here, but I am going to kind of give it to you straight. So, since I know better than to alienate my audience 10 minutes into my presentation, what I'm talking about here is groupism. And I think we can all agree on that term, is groupism, which is a human tendency. Humans are groupist, and this means that we prefer our own groups. We really do. And there's tons of research that says that this is true, and you could take a semester-long course with me at City College, and I could lay out all the research for you, but I don't need to do that here because I can skip to the punchline. All the research points in the same direction. It pretty much all says the same thing. So, to summarize the research, I'm going to share with you 3 important terms, and this is the first one. Perceptual fluency. So, perceptual fluency has to deal with the fact that our minds like things that are easy. We're lazy thinkers. We really are human beings. That's part of the makeup of our brain. Social scientists call it, they say that we're cognitive misers, meaning that we're really kind of stingy with our mental space and our mental effort, so we like when things are easy. So when we determine that someone is like us or similar to us, it makes it easier to think about them and understand them and communicate with them, really. But what happens is we end up confusing our fluency or ease of thinking with liking and preference. And so when it's easy for us to understand and think about and communicate with people, we mistake it for liking them more. Okay, and that's one of the reasons why we're groupist. So if we're sexist, it's because we're groupist. If we're ageist, it's because we're groupist. And if we're racist, it's because we're groupist. Okay? So that would be fine, because we could manage through that. But there's some other interesting phenomena that end up coming out of this interesting groupism. And one of these is positive distinctiveness. So positive distinctiveness says that it's not enough for us to be in different groups. I think you probably know what's coming up. We need to be better, right? Our group needs to feel superior. So just as soon as there is a delineation of a variety of groups, we start intergroup competition. And if there's no basis on which to compete, we invent one. And that's why we have competitive sports. A long time ago, humans are sitting around and they're like, I want to show that I'm better than you, right? It's kind of in our nature to want to have positive distinctiveness. I think you'll find this pretty fascinating. All of this leads to a concept called the minimal group paradigm. And this suggests that not only do we need to be significantly better than other groups, but we need to do so in a way that makes sure that we have significantly more rewards than the other group. So, when given the choice to help only our own group or to help our group and an outgroup at no additional cost to us, we choose to help only our group the majority of the time. And in fact, the research points to this number, 85% of the time, to be exact. So let me just give you a little example. This one works with my kids because it involves money. So if I have two $10 bills in my hands, right, and I'm given a variety of choices on how I can spend them. Here's my choices. There's 3 choices. One option is to give the $10 bill to an out-group member and to throw the other $10 bill in the trash, so I get nothing. Another option is to give the out-group member a $10 bill and keep the $10 bill for myself. Right? Seems like a good, it's a win-win situation. The last option is to keep one $10 bill for myself. Instead of giving it to the out-group member, throw that one and the other one in the trash. 85% of the time, the choice people would make is to keep the $10 for themselves, and instead of sharing the other $10 with the out-group member, to just put it away somewhere. Okay, I know, it sounds astonishing, but when you really look at everything we know about human nature and all the things we see in the news and all of our social problems, it really does make sense that this is the way people operate. We can see evidence of it in our society, right? So look, if you've only been fighting for the causes that you think impact your own group, I totally get it. In fact, a lot of people would judge you for that, but because I study this stuff, all it tells me is that you're a human being, right? Because this is how we operate. We fight for the groups that we're invested in, and we often do that at the expense of spending our time and our energy and our volunteer work on other groups that we may not feel totally invested in, right? It's kind of what humans do. But you've heard this concept of the lizard brain. Did you ever hear this term? Okay, so this is us using our lizard brain, essentially. So the lizard brain is the limbic cortex, and despite evolution for 285 million years, it's similar to the total brain capacity of a modern lizard, and that's why it's called the lizard brain. It's in charge of these things, and I love this: fight, flight, feeding, fear, and fornication. That's what the lizard brain is in charge of. And we tend to use it because we're cognitive misers. We tend to use the lizard brain for a lot of our reactions and our behaviors.
Did you repeat that?
The F's: fight, flight, feeding, fear, and fornication. And the bottom line is that those are our survival needs, right? And so the lizard brain is in charge of our survival needs. But we're perfectly capable of using the more advanced parts of our brain, responsible for things like empathy and big picture thinking. It's just that we tend not to default to those. But I'm here today to tell you it's time to raise our consciousness when it comes to intergroup behavior and stop using the lizard brain and start using more consciousness. So just for an example, if you saw someone from a perceived outgroup being attacked, the lizard brain would tell you to run away, not to help that person. But operating in different parts of the brain, because we have empathy, we know that we should help, even if we gain nothing from helping, and even if we put ourselves at risks for helping. We know that we should help. So that's the research on groupism in a nutshell. So you might want to know how we translate this consciousness I'm talking about, not using the lizard brain, using a deeper part of our brain. How do we translate that into intersectional activism? Well, thankfully we have a few guides. Most of you know this woman. Can you help me? Gloria Steinem. So she knows a few things about social movements. How many of you saw Gloria Steinem at the Arlington Theater? Okay, a couple of you did. If you weren't there, I'm going to summarize a really important piece. And in fact, if you were there, I want to remind you of this piece because you might have missed it. It went so fast. Gloria Steinem said, "You cannot be a feminist without being an anti-racist." those exact words. And people in here who are friends with me on Facebook saw my Facebook blow up because I like totally bad manners. I pulled out my phone during her talk and just blasted it out because that was what I came to hear from her talk. And she said it. She said it loud and proud. So since you've invited me here, I'm assuming you want to know a little bit more about how exactly then to be an anti-racist, right? Because that's supposed to be my specialty. So let me introduce you to Showing Up for Racial Justice, and that's the organization that I'm a part of. So Showing Up for Racial Justice, or SURJ, is a national organization. We have over 150 chapters and affiliate groups across the United States, committed to drawing white people into racial justice action as part of a multi-racial movement to specifically dismantle white supremacy. And as I mentioned earlier, I co-founded the Santa Barbara chapter with a colleague of mine named Anna Chagnon. So that term white supremacy kind of freaks white people out in the same way that if you think I'm about to call you racist. So don't worry, again, relax. But I am going to use the term white supremacy quite a lot in the next minute or two here. So if you don't think there's a need to openly speak about and call out and dismantle white supremacy, then you haven't seen this, which is the Southern Poverty Law Center's hate map. And it shows the official hate and white supremacist groups in the United States. And we don't have time to count, so I did it for you earlier. There's 917 and growing. As you're well aware, growing at an unprecedented rate due to some recent events in our country. So here's how we see it. Here's how we see it in SURJ. If these folks are organizing to spread white supremacy, guess what we need to do? We need to organize to fight white supremacy. It's as simple as that. So that's where we stand in SURJ, and that's my kind of personal ethos. And I know you don't like to hear this. It's hard to hear, it really is. But the truth is, and a lot of you heard me say this in my speech at the Women's March, if you're not fighting white supremacy, are you ready for this? If you're not out there fighting it, you are investing in it. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about that. How do we do it? So at SURJ, this national organization was actually created to answer a direct call of action by communities of color. So we did not create this idea ourselves because that would inherently be a bad idea. We're answering a direct call of action by communities of color for white people to organize their own racial in-groups. In fact, the call to action for white folks to organize their own people has been made by people of color since the inception of the Civil Rights Movement. Here's Malcolm X, who says, "Where the really sincere white people have got to do their proving of themselves is not among the black victims, but out on the battle lines of where America's racism really is. And that's in their own home communities. America's racism is among their own fellow whites. That's where sincere whites who really need to accomplish something have got to work." So these ideas are not new, but they are reiterated by modern-day racial justice activists. So you may know that Alicia Garza is one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter. And she says, we need you defecting from white supremacy and changing the narrative of white supremacy by breaking white silence. So at SURJ, our answer to these calls to action involves doing these two specific things. One of them is taking responsibility for educating ourselves about our own racial group and our own privilege and our role in systematic racism. And the second thing that we do is working harder to directly support communities of color in their already existing efforts to combat racism and racial justice. So our specific mission is actually quite specific. And it's to move 7 million white Americans into anti-racist action, because that's the number that we'll need. So before you count yourself as one of the 7 million, because most people would like to say, yes, I'm one of the 7 million anti-racists, not one of the other party racists, let's talk about what it means to be an anti-racist. And I know that you're already probably a non-racist, right? But that's simply not enough. This is different, and it's a lot harder. So buckle up here while I explain to you what you have to do. So how to be an anti-racist includes a few things here, and there are quite a lot more of them, but I'll just detail these right now. first one is understanding our mutual interest, and this is critically important. Fighting for racial justice and justice for all people is not our duty to marginalized groups. It's our duty to the collective well-being of all members of our society, including our very own race. We will all be better off when we dismantle this model. Everybody collectively will benefit. Just to think about in the context of this group, would you want men to help us women because they felt sorry for us? Or because they felt guilty for all the things they've done? That would be telling me that they don't understand that their liberation is bound in ours. We as women will be better off, and men will be better off when we have equality between the sexes. So that's the first concept of mutual interest. It's not charity work. It is a vested interest in all of our well-being. The second piece is to educate yourself on your own privilege and our country's legacy of racism. And a lot of this work you have to do on your own because nobody's going to spoon feed it to you. However, there really are a lot more resources now than ever, and so there's really no excuse to be educating yourself and learning more. I'll just show you my blog here. I've got a blog. I write in it about every month, and it's directed specifically at white people who'd like to be doing more for racial justice action. And it's written in a tone that is welcoming, asking you to join us and saying you do not have to know everything. You don't have to know how to do it perfectly. But I've been doing this for a while, and I've got some ideas that might be helpful for you, and I share them here. So this piece is one that we share with our chapter for new members. It's called White Allyship 101. It's not a process. It's a process, not an identity. Because you'll find that a lot of white people, when they join racial justice action, they suddenly want to be identified as an ally person by wearing a safety pin and doing all these other things that are really kind of counterproductive. Because it's not something we can select as an identity. It's something that is a process. So the third way that you can be, or start to learn how to be an anti-racist, is by understanding how to leverage your own privilege. And this is really important. As women, we suffer from this thing called the double bind. Have you heard this before, the double bind? It means that when we speak out, we're often punished. And when we are silent, we're also punished. So there's kind of a no-win situation. And if you think you suffer from that as a woman, people of color suffer from that tenfold. And a perfect example I'd like to share with you is the press regarding the Black Lives Matter movement. If you, on your own time, went onto the webpage for Black Lives Matter and you read what they stand for, you would be on board, 100%. In fact, I'm inclined to believe that you might write a check at that moment. And you might feel bad about the fact that you've misunderstood the group. And it's simply because of the double bind. When people of color have spoken out about oppression, they've been punished. And so leveraging our privilege has to do with us speaking out as well and explaining to people that oppression is bad. And maybe I don't have a vested interest, right, in equality between the races, because looking at me, you see me and I'm white. But I'm speaking out anyway, so I won't suffer from the double bind. The other way to leverage your own privilege is to understand the fact that people are more persuaded by their own in-groups. And in this case, this is our racial in-group. So as white people ourselves, calling white people in to join the fight for racial justice is our strength. And frankly, it's why I'm here speaking to you about racial justice instead of my friends from Black Lives Matter Santa Barbara. It's why you had a white lady come in and talk to you about racism. So, the last piece, and this is the most important one, this is to take action. So we can't just educate ourselves, and as white people, it's so in our mode to bury our heads in a book and go get a PhD on this topic, and then think it to death until we're finally ready to do something. That is such a privileged approach to this urgent problem. We need to take action right now. So, what can we do moving forward? Well, You might be asking yourself, isn't feminism already pretty inclusive? You know, you saw the Women's March piece, and it had the black, brown, and white hands united. And so isn't it inclusive already? Well, let me tell you a little bit about our most important guiding principle at Surge, Showing Up for Racial Justice. And that's that white people need to be accountable to people of color, so we don't define our success. They do. And here's some feedback about how white folks in America are doing when it comes to racism. This is also from lunch. Good avocado on racism, so white people notice it. I don't know how that could have been said better. It really kind of puts a spotlight on the issue. So another important aspect of accountability is not waiting for communities of color to spell it out, like it's spelled out here, but to open your eyes and to just look around at what's being done for racial justice. And when I look around, I see a lot of heavy lifting for anti-racist action being done by Black Lives Matter, the movement for Black Lives, and other groups that are led by people of color. So why are Black organizers doing all the heavy lifting for racial justice? Well, it's because of the reasons why I already explained today. It's everything I've already discussed. First of all, we see ourselves as separate groups, right? We don't understand our mutual investment in racial equality. And then the last reason, and this one's really tough, it's not life or death for us, right? So your privilege has never required that you care about this as if your life or the life of your loved ones depends on it. Because I know women, and when there is a crisis and someone you love's life is in jeopardy, we act, don't we? We are the first ones to come in and try and solve the problem. In fact, you've probably been compelled to believe that something was a crisis internationally, and maybe you've given money, right, after disaster to direct relief for these other organizations who are working for those things. So I'm here to tell you this is a crisis. I want to compel you to act, and I don't want you to sleep at night without doing something. That's my role. I really want you to wake up to the reality that the lives of your children, your own life, and your grandchildren, and everyone who shares this country depends on us getting together and acting. I have a clip that I want to show you. And I know that, I'm not going to show it to you, you're going to hear it. I know that this is a friendly social gathering, and I keep referring to us keeping it non-intimidating. But I do want to warn you against the need to keep this kind of conversation entirely positive. Because if we don't open our eyes to some of the awful, awful realities, we really aren't compelled to act. So I'm just going to share an audio clip with you. And you might remember Sandra the Hunt. This audio clip comes from a podcast I was listening to recently, which reminded me of the audio I had heard when this incident occurred. In this clip, a gentleman is visiting a survivors group, which is a group of mothers who have all lost their children to murder by police, essentially. And they're all women of color. And I just want to tell you, what he discovers there. And then it is going to play the clip of the incident with Sandra Glenn. So please pardon me while I feel the need to share this with you. It might be a little loud, so I'll adjust.
Mind just,
I am not going to make not one comment until I just.
no comment. Wait a minute, this woman. I mean, the only comment I was looking for was if you could just describe for me what we got on the table. Because I'm just,
What's on the table?
Yeah, just what's on the table.
I mean, this table?
This table right here.
So I think you have tea, you have sweet tea, you have orange juice, and then you have your condiments for that, but on the breakfast table. Okay.
What's up?
You've got your eggs, you've got your grits, you've got your bacon, you've got your sausage. You got everything you want to have to get nice, good, and full on today. So I'm excited.
Can I get your name?
Sure, Geneva Reedville. I'm the mother of Sandra Bland.
In case you don't remember, July 10th, 2015.
Hello, ma'am. Will it take time to control the reason for your stoppage? You failed to signal your lane change. You got your driver's license insurance with you? You give me a few minutes, all right?
Sandra Bland is pulled over in a small town in Texas. The cop runs her information, comes back to the car.
You mind putting out your cigarette, please? Don't mind.
I'm in my car. I have to put out my cigarette.
Well, you can step on out now.
I don't have to step out of my car.
Step out of the car. Step out of the car.
No, you don't have the right.
Step out of the car.
You do not have the right to do that.
I do have the right. Step out, or I will remove
I
you.
didn't get removed for a failure.
Step out, or I will remove you. I'm giving you a lawful order.
Don't touch me.
Get out of the car.
Don't touch me. I'm not under arrest. You don't have the right to
You
touch me.
are under arrest.
I'm under arrest for what?
Get out of the car.
And then you
I will light you up. Get out.
Wow.
Now.
Eventually, Sandra gets out of the car.
For a failure to signal. You're doing all of this for
Get over there.
You're about to break my wrist. Can you stop? You are fucking
Stop.
Sandra Glenn was taken into custody, and as many of you know, 3 days later, it was stated in the press that she hanged herself in her jail cell. Her family and support groups that are fighting against this dispute this claim and believe that she was a victim of racialized violence, not only by the police during her arrest, but in the jail. She was 28 years old. I think most of us in this room can agree that that situation would not have turned out the same way if it had been you or I in that car. And so what I'd like this to do is to compel you to action. I have things for you to actually do to make yourself feel better after hearing something as awful as that. So moving forward, can everybody put up their fingers like this? And the reason I'm having you do it is because you're going to remember that you did this. It's not with these. It's because I need you to remember two things. So when you're laying in bed at night and you're like, what did she say? This is all I need you to remember. 1, 2. The first thing is to join an anti-racism group. You can join Surge, that's the one I represent, but there are a lot of other ones. I'm sorry, this is the second thing. But this is an important piece. Yeah. Actually, I do want to back up and say the first thing is to end white silence. I accidentally deleted that slide. But really, you need to end white silence by discussing these things out loud with the people you care about in your life. So you should discuss it with your family. You should absolutely discuss it with your children, your grandchildren, your coworkers, and please discuss it on social media. Because unless all of us know these things that are happening, and unless we're compelled to act, there won't be enough action. There won't be those 7 million white people joining the fight for racial justice. Now to the second piece, and this is joining an anti-racism group. Again, Surge is one of many options, and you're more than welcome in our group. There's lots of other ways that you can join and do something. At Surge, we do need a ton of help in the form of talent, we need labor, we need money, and we need a lot of other resources that every other group needs to get this done. So this group compelled me to come and speak to you. I could not help myself because I was so motivated to meet this phenomenal room full of women who did this. You demanded that the University Club amend its bylaws to accept women as full members for the first time in history. Yes, you did. Your story is really inspiring. It's compelling to me. But your story is not over. And I don't want you to think that for 1 minute it's over. So ask yourself, where are you in this current story that I'm telling right now that will one day become our shared and collective history? We've spent so long, most of you spent longer than I have, trying to awaken men and many women from the blissful ignorance of the 50s. The women's movement was meant to kind of jostle America out of its slumber, right? And to awaken us to the fact that 50% of our population was crushingly unhappy under these oppressive social contracts created by members of our society who happened to have power at the time the roles were handed out. And we look at this now and it's almost funny until you remember that this was real. You've done such an amazing job, and thank you personally from me to all of you, because you ladies have paved the way for the things and privileges that I now have. Even the fact that I'm sitting in this room, and especially the fact that I'm up here speaking about this right now. But there's more work to do. So I'm asking you, can we do it better this time? This is feminism 2.0, ladies. Where being feminist means that you understand the necessity of an intersectional approach to true liberty and justice for all. And I hope today I've compelled you not only to believe the absolute truth of these words, but to declare yourself an intersectional activist. And as one, to do this thing I've been asking you to do, which is to show up for racial justice and all of the important movements, as if your life depends on it, because it does. After all, our liberation is bound in each other's. Thank you. I have more material on our group, and I also have business cards if you'd like to contact me as well. Yes, I'd be happy to take questions if you have time, but I was aware that folks might have to leave by 1 o'clock, so I can take a
I just, given that you reminded us of something, it was such a powerful movement, and we did get through the back door. A lot of us lived that. Do you have any suggestions as what this group can take that, as we've all gotten older and lasted through last ceilings, if we could spontaneously throw some at us?
Yes, I have many suggestions for things that you can do. Right now, something really exciting is happening across the nation and now in our town. And this is called Beyond the Moment. What this is a call for all organizing groups fighting for all different causes to come together to be strengthened by our mutual interests and our mutual investment in similar causes. So this Beyond the Moment campaign was started by the Movement for Black Lives. No surprise, because like I said, they're the ones doing the heavy lifting on most of this. They put out a direct call to action for all different groups of people to link up and communicate and share their collective power. When I saw this campaign, I thought, I need something more to do. I'm not busy enough. So I volunteered to be the Santa Barbara Connect on this. And our first meeting is actually tomorrow. It's online, so it's very convenient. But we're asking people who are leaders of any group in town who want to join together so that we can all work collectively to be part of this communication stream so that we can get in touch with each other very easily and to share our resources. The campaign is called Beyond the Moment. But if you email me at sbsurge@gmail.com, I can put you on our conference call tomorrow. Tomorrow is a little soon because I know you ladies haven't had a chance to get together and see if this is something you can endorse. And it's never too late. You can join us at any time. So if at your next meeting you say, hey, maybe we should link up with Carrie from Surge, and when they're doing an action, they can tell us about it. And if it's something that we want to join, we can come and do it. All you have to do is get on this share group, and I can let you know what all the things are happening. Does that help?
Did you say surge at gmail.com?
sbsurj@gmail.com. And it's also on my business cards, which I can pass around. You can spread those around. Yes, please, Lisa.
I have several white women friends who disagree about the concept of white privilege.
Mm-hmm.
I am at a loss because I feel like it's this complicated thing to explain, and I don't have hours and hours to go into institutional racism and all these things with them. So can you help us kind of, shorten from the point from A to B for how we can talk to our friends who don't believe that they are privileged as white people?
Thank you, because this really is 90% of the battle. If you get it and you're in the movement already, I'm not even talking to you. You're already there. You're at the march with me. We're doing the thing. We know each other really well. It's the people who aren't on board that are the ones we consider it our call to action to share education and bring people on board. So what's the best way to do that? I started writing my blog for exactly this reason. I could not find the time or the words or even the patience, frankly, to have these conversations over and over and over again. So I have this blog where I go through a very 100 level, kind of basic level exposure to what is white privilege. But the quote that helps me the most when I'm trying to explain it to somebody is that privilege is when you think there's not a problem because it doesn't affect you personally. And that's privilege of any kind. So men might suffer from that kind of privilege, and they don't really get why we feel like we need so many rights. Yes, you know, or any group that is privileged, they just don't see the problem because it doesn't affect them. And so this concept of mutual investment can be very persuasive to people who don't see the problem, because what you're telling them is there's a problem collectively. It's actually affecting you. You just don't know it, and here's how. So in a nutshell, how do you kind of break down our country's legacy of racism and structural institutional racism and white privilege in one conversation? It is very hard to do. I will tell you it doesn't work. Shame and blame never work. And so that is my greatest challenge as a human being, and the greatest test of my patience is when someone presents me with explicitly racist ideas, and I'm tempted to get angry, create shame, and blame them. The way to do it, and it's a quote I have on my office door actually, is to use education. Education is the most powerful tool that we can use to change the world.
I asked if you were going to make questions because I had one.
Well, please, you should have been first.
That's right. Okay. I'll be good. No. It would be unnatural like you though. I want to know where that was. If you showed us it was a movie about the woman who theoretically contained herself. What state did
That was in Texas.
You don't know.
Yeah. Did you have any more to your question?
No.
I just want to make a comment because in 1975, when the liberation movement started and the women feminists, one of the things that I found at that time, a lot of women were hesitant to get into any of that because they thought it was totally anti-men.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a concept that people were not trying to get rid of men, they were trying to educate them as to the fact that they were privileged in work society and we weren't.
Yes.
And I think that has a lot to do with it. You're talking about the education, that means so much. But sometimes it's just a word of, it's not anti-men, it's not anti this group or that group. As you put it, it's putting us all together.
Absolutely. And I think that the anti-fear that comes in any movement comes from a pseudo model of scarcity. And this is a model that basically says, if I'm thriving, if things are going well for me, if I give more to you, or if I help you, it's always going to be at the risk of me, because there's scarcity, right? And while that's true in certain contexts about certain things, racial equality is not a scarcity game. We don't give up our own equality when we afford equality to all human beings. It doesn't work that way. And the same thing with gender. Men don't lose out because women gain privileges. Because ultimately, we find ways to work it out so that all of us win. So relying on that scarcity model, and I think we do that, especially as an individualistic culture, especially in the United States, we feel like we're going to get what's ours, and it's often at the risk of other people. So it is a common reaction to any movement like this that you're against men, you're against white people. We're against white supremacy. And that's the belief that white people are superior. And that's all we're against. You know, I think we can come together and nobody has to lose when we can be racially equality for everybody. Thanks for your question.
Yeah, I have two questions, Carrie. It's nice, this group that you're part of, but I guess I would just make one suggestion that maybe you include a few more options, like...
For you?
No, there's just so many ways that you can address this issue. And I guess the question I do have, though, is what brought you into this, your personal story? What impacted you that you chose this particular venue? Was it just your academic background in communications that brought you to this? I'm just curious what the incident was that brought you to this.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'll answer your first question first, and that has to do with other options.
There's so many things, like the incarceration issue that is part of the Black Lives Matter. And of course, when you know the good work that is being done against these hate groups by the Center for Southern Poverty Center, I mean, they've been there, and their legal remedies that they're trying to really have an impact. So I'm just, I was just thinking.
So I'll tell you, so I'm going to answer first the variety of options you have to choose from, and then second I can tell you just briefly my personal story, and I'll try to keep it short. The first answer is, regarding showing up for racial justice, the reason that I suggest us, and I didn't have time to go into the information I brought, giving more, but here's how we divide. We have 8 working groups. Our working groups are showing up for Muslim and Arab Americans, showing up for health equity, showing up for environmental justice, showing up for immigrant rights, showing up to dismantle racialized policing, showing up for anti-racism education in higher ed, and showing up for racial equity in K through 12 schools. So those are our groups, but for each of our work groups, there's another group in town addressing the same
I guess
thing.
my point, Carrie, is just when you say there are 2 ways to fight this, I was just suggesting that.
Oh yeah, not only 2
that
ways.
you could just say this is just not. There's only 2.
Oh, there's not only 2. I'm sorry. If
Well,
yeah, if you see what I was saying in a nutshell, I've got it all figured out. There's 2 ways. And this is all you need to know. No, absolutely not. Yeah, so those are the 2 that I'm offering you today, but this is a very beginning of a conversation. And so if this piques your interest, and those are 2 things you can kind of do now, there's many, many, many more things for you to do.
Carrie, before you share your story, can I just share about your mailing list?
Oh, please.
Because if you get on the Surge mailing list, they send out stuff you can do every week. Just as an example.
That's not my concern.
Oh no, I know. It was the 2 things. No, I get it. I just want to share with everybody. I just want everybody to know that if you get on the mailing list, you'll get stuff to do. Besides the 2, I know what you mean. I totally get what you meant by that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and our mailing list isn't our events. We're sharing events for organizations led by people of color that need support, and also all sorts of education for white folks as well that are occurring around town that are not put on by us. So if you do get on our mailing list, you'll get a suggestion for every day of the week, different things you can do in different groups in different ways. So if it seems that I was suggesting that there's only 2 things you need to do, I retract. And my attorney's here to I retract that statement if I misspoke. These are 2 suggestions for you today, with lots of room for additional things. And then just quickly, my personal story. When I was young and when I had the kind of activism fire, I started to learn about a lot of things that were going on in other countries around the world. And I got really motivated to take direct action for those things. And one of the jobs that I do now is I take students from City College to study abroad programs, and we visit developing countries where we learn about intergroup communication and learn about all sorts of things. And it's quite an eye-opening experience for them, and it's the experience that I had when I was younger that I like to share now with other young people. Because I was so compelled to believe that there were these really extreme and urgent problems around the world, and there are. But it wasn't until, the past decade or so that I really started to notice that my time and energy might be better spent addressing issues that are becoming increasingly apparent for folks like me in our culture here in the United States. So I didn't work on racial justice as a young person because I had such privilege that I wasn't even aware of the injustices that existed. And as I've grown and traveled and learned and listened and exposed myself to more, I've been compelled to do action right here in the United States. And this is an issue that I consider one of our most urgent. That's my personal story. There are more branches to that story, but that's for another time. Any other questions? Yes, please.
Is there a way for you to put a positive spin on us being in Santa Barbara? Like this little microcosm, and obviously you're reaching out, which is great. But I'm just asking for, sometimes I just feel like, shoot, I live in this bubble, and our Black population is so low, and we just are exposed to so little. It's really hard to feel like you're part of the rest of the world.
And my daughter's
multiple problems with that. What I was going to say initially is one thing we can do, the fact that we live here in Santa Barbara, well, we do have more money than a lot of people. And this movement does take money and time and investment and resources and energy. So we are, in a lot of ways, many of us in a privileged town, we have a lot to give. And so that's an added bonus for us. But in terms of how do we wake up our town and how do we sort of make people compelled to act for this, that is a huge challenge. And I think it occurs in little groups like this and even littler groups. I'm sitting down to coffee and another individual a couple different times a week talking about these things, and people have expressed interest. A one-on-one basis can be very effective, actually more than this. Yes.
I just want to speak to that. You had asked a question about explaining white privilege.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with a colleague right after the election, and he was expressing his enthusiasm for the outcome. And so that just sort of went into a larger conversation, but we talked for about an hour. And I said, I want you to think about white privilege this way, is that your skin is your camouflage. I said, you can go out and you could be, I named all sorts of things that he could have done in his lifetime, and people look at him and look suspected. I said, when I go out, when brown skin is seen as a weapon, I've never seen as unarmed. I've always seen as suspicious. And I'll give you an example. I was actually shopping this weekend, and I was asked for ID. Using my debit card. Why? In Santa Barbara. Why would you need my ID if I'm using my debit card? And sort of I shop there all the time. So those are the differences. So when your friends ask, you think about skin as camouflage as opposed to, does that make
Yes.
I'm sitting here like, that's so great. And I'm like, that's not great at all. But, it's not privilege for me.
But it's a great way to put it.
Yeah, it's not privilege of economic or social status and things like that. It's just what you may or may not be suspected of.
Yeah.
Or accused of those kind of things that I think of. And so he actually said, he goes, I have never had a bigger epiphany about racism than in that moment. When Tom came back and thanked me again the next day, it says that I just never thought about it that way.
And here, it's the shape of the skin, not the race of the skin. The shape of the skin is the civil rights movement. I was involved in Psych in 64. So I think that's really important point. What is our camouflage? It's not just racism. I think I'm offended by that. We're not all white racists. In fact, the word racism, we want to get out of the dictionary. Because we all have the same heart. If you open up a heart, it's all the same color, it's all the same shape, all the same blood. Anyway, I think that's really important.
Thanks for sharing that. Personal stories go a long way to speak to people, and when you share your direct experience, I think that can be really eye-opening, like you said.
I want to share something because of the comment about our community and what privilege we have, which of course we do. But what is not known about our community is that there is an enormous amount of poverty and an enormous amount of need. And for instance, 3.4%, I might be off on the decimal, of the children in our schools are living below the poverty level. I mean, this is something that is truly shocking when you think of how we mostly probably live. So there, and particularly because this is an expensive community to live in, housing, things like this, people are living in extraordinary conditions. So, I mean, there are people that are stuck in nursing homes because they can't find a place to go where they could get in-home support, for instance. And I mean, it's tragic. So if you, think about this community even, everything, in fact, there was one time when Santa Barbara was considered a perfect microcosm of all of California, which is, we would think odd, but if you really start thinking about it, it makes a lot of sense. So there's a lot of action that can be taken.
A lot of action. And I knew when we spoke before, and you mentioned your work on homelessness, I knew that I didn't need to explain intersectional activism to you because you see that there are all these different issues that intersect. And so when I say we in Santa Barbara, I'm talking about anybody who can afford a $30 lunch.
Yes.
And I actually mean we in this room. We as a community are actually much more wide-ranging than we would believe or we would even know. My children go to a Title I school where 80% are low-income families. And so that is very, very clear and apparent to me and to a lot of people who go to our public schools in this town. It is huge, and it goes exactly with what I'm saying, that, anybody we're fighting for our collective well-being, whether those people be homeless, whether they be oppressed for some other reason, or just haven't been born with the same privileges that were afforded to us. We're fighting for it all together, and that's intersectional. Thanks for shining a spotlight on that piece of our community.
Well, thank you very, very
Thank
much.
you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.